In 1978, 5 men mysteriously disappeared in Chico, California, on their way home from a college basketball game. Their car was later discovered, and months later, most of the bodies of these men were found. Most, not all. The 4 of the 5 bodies that were found were frozen to death. But they were not far from the nearest town. They weren't in the middle of nowhere. Civilization was not that distant. Their unexplained deaths have been called the American Dyatlov Pass because it shares a number of similarities to the strange and unexplained deaths of Russian skiers that happened 20 years earlier. So what happened to the 5 men who disappeared on a cold night in February 1978? Even now, so many years later, this case remains largely unsolved. There has been no discernible reason as to why 5 men would get out of their car in the middle of the night, in the middle of February, run out into the snow, and never look back, ultimately perishing in the cold wilderness. This is the American Dyatlov Pass. On February 24th, 1978, 5 men from Yuba City, all basketball fans, Gary Mathias, Jack Hewitt, William Sterling, Ted Weir, and Jack Madruga, left a college game in Chico, 40 miles away from Yuba City, in Madruga's car, a Mercury Montego. All 5 were to play a basketball game on the 25th, the very next day. They all had mental issues of varying sorts, and had met at a local support group, although 2 of them, Madruga and Mathias, had served in the US Army. After the game, before hitting the highway, the guys stopped at a gas station and picked up some snacks, and then drove off into the night. This was the last time any of the men were seen alive. The families of all 5 established that none of them had returned home from the previous night. The police launched an investigation, and although it took a few days, on February 28th, 4 days later, they finally located the car. However, the car was halfway up the mountains, nowhere near the route they would have taken to get home after the game. Inside the car was evidence suggesting that men had been in it between when they were last seen and when it was abandoned. The wrappers and empty cartons and cans they had purchased in Chico were present, along with programs from the basketball game they had watched, and a neatly folded road map of California. But the discovery of the car, it raised more questions than it answered. Namely, where would they go and why the heck would they get out of the car? This is February in the middle of the Sierra Nevada mountains. The car was stuck and had been spinning on its wheels, but was fully functional and could easily have been pushed to more stable ground. It had enough gas, and nothing untoward was found in the automobile. There was absolutely nothing wrong with the car, outside or inside. It was stuck a little bit on the snow, but it could have easily been pushed by 5 men back onto the road. None of the men's families could speculate as to why they might have driven up a long and winding dirt road. No trace of the men was found other than the car. There was no sign of them anywhere. And unfortunately, due to the thick, high levels of snow, nothing more could be done to investigate what happened until the thaw came. Then, 3 months later on June 4th, a group of motorcyclists discovered a body, which later proved to be that of Ted Weir, in an unheated ranger cabin a mile or so from where the car was discovered. He was shoeless, lying on a mattress with a makeshift shroud pulled over his body. Opened tin cans of military sea rations littered the floor of the cabin. Some had been opened with a military issue can opener, and it was theorized that either Madruga or Mathias may have had this, as both had served in the army. Oddly, there was no sign that a fire had been built, even though there was tons of matches and papers lying around. They could have easily made a fire to keep themselves warm and not frozen to death, but they didn't. Later investigations proved that an exterior tank was full of propane, and that had that been opened, the cabin would have been filled with heat. There were also other strange things with Weir's body. He wasn't wearing shoes, but otherwise he was fully clothed. A table beside the bed on which he lay held some of his personal possessions, as well as a wristwatch with a crystal missing, which was confirmed to belong to none of the 5 men. Furthermore, Weir had 2 to 3 months of beard growth on his face and had lost more than 100 pounds. He was badly frostbitten and had died of starvation, but he starved to death in a room that also contained a locker, which was absolutely chock full of provisions that would have fed all 5 men for a year. Now, it was locked, but it could have been easily broken open, and there was enough food to sustain them for a long time, long enough into the summer when they would have easily been rescued. Within a few weeks, the skeletal remains of Hewitt, Madruga, and Sterling were discovered fairly close to the trailer. One of the men, Gary Mathias, he has never been found. His body has never been found. He just simply disappeared. Oddly enough, though, his tennis shoes, the ones he had been wearing that night, were in the cabin. No one knows what happened to the men after they left the car and got to the trailer. The only thing investigators have been able to discern is that at some point, 3 of the men left the trailer, perhaps to go find help, and then came back to find Weir dead of exposure and starvation. Although all 5 men were described as slow in the original coverage of the story, their disabilities weren't quite severe. Certainly, both Ted Weir and Jack Hewitt seem to have been pretty severely disabled. Jack Madruga seems to have been a bit slow, but not to the same extent. Gary Mathias, on the other hand, was schizophrenic rather than truly disabled. He was under a doctor's care and had taken his medication on the day of the trip to Chico. Both Madruga and Mathias, after all, they both had driving licenses and both had served in the US Army. One weird thing was noticed inside the car itself. There were maps in the glove compartment, and all were present. This kind of implies then that the men, they weren't lost. As if they were lost, the maps would have been out of the glove compartment, as they would have been actively looking at them. Also, the heavily built car, the Montego, it had made its way up the winding mountain road and had no fresh dents or damage, implying that whoever was driving the car knew the road and knew it well. Except that none of the 5 men knew it. They had never been there before. So, was somebody else driving the car? Was there a 6th person there? A possible 6th member, possibly responsible for the deaths, has been implied by a witness. Joseph Shones had driven up the same road and had gotten stuck. He was digging himself out and suffered a heart attack while doing so, and so he got back in his vehicle. While waiting in the car, he heard whistling noises, and looking up, saw a group of men and a woman with a baby in the light cast by another car, some distance up the road. The other car was Madruga's Montego. He called out for assistance, wherein the lights of the other car shut off, and the noises stopped. Another theory is that some sort of nefarious goings-on were afoot, and that the men had picked up a hitchhiker, who in one way or another had commandeered the car. Maybe forced them out of the car. They stumbled off into the dark, found the trailer, and died there. While 4 of the men in the party are dead, one member of the party is still considered missing. The body of Gary Mathias was never discovered, and his family believes he may have been the cause of the entire incident. Mathias suffered from schizophrenia, but according to his family, he'd been religious about taking his medication. There are police records of Mathias becoming violent when he failed to take his meds, so there is a possibility that he forgot to take his meds and acted out, causing everyone to run away. Along with Weehir's body in the trailer, police discovered Mathias's shoes. They believe he took Weehir's shoes, left his trainers in the trailer, and took off. While he's still believed to be missing, many investigators believe that Mathias fell victim to the elements and was buried under the snow, where his body decomposed before it was melted by the spring weather. We will likely never know what truly happened that night in what is considered the American Dyatlov Pass. Clues point to them knowing the area, purposely leaving the car, which was in fine condition, and then later purposely leaving the trailer, with no reason, but probably with purpose. Why? Why not heat the trailer? There was a propane tank readily available. Why not eat the foodstuffs? They were probably in the trailer for a while, and it was locked, but could have easily been opened. Why didn't they use the maps if they were truly lost? But they never did. They never took them out of the glove compartment. So many unanswered questions. Thanks for watching. Mike out.